Hi, and welcome to Sound Bites. My name is Bill Binch. I'm an operating partner with Battery. And today I'm excited to have a guest from within the Battery portfolio, Andy Kofoid, president of Databricks. Started his career at IBM and hit some notable spots like IBM and Oracle. Had some other stops along the way before joining ExactTarget as their chief operating officer. He was there when the acquisition by Salesforce.com went through, and he joined Salesforce for a lengthy 8-year tenure before making the jump to his current spot where he is today at Databricks as their president, as I mentioned before. So today, we're going to cover a range of topics, starting with some career discussion, talk about education and its impact on one's career, and then mostly spend our time talking about scaling enterprises. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Bill. Glad to be here, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you bet. I'm looking forward to jumping in with you here. You started your career at IBM, was there for 5 years, then went to Oracle for another 5 years. These are two powerhouses known for their training investment that they put into sales teams. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about the importance of enablement and the frameworks that companies like IBM and Oracle provided you earlier in your career.
Yeah, great question. And, I think, and had I known it at the time, I wish I had great vision on why I did it. But, you think about when I came out of the university in the late 80s, there wasn't the small startup, enterprise software vendors that, Bill, you and I have been part of over, our many decade career. But in IBM's brain in the late 80s was really, really good. And it was really focused on training and hiring people out of college and kind of helping them develop through their, through the learning of understanding sales and, teaching you the structure and the foundation of how to sell, the process, the discipline, which, many people don't get earlier in their career. So I felt very fortunate for that. And, then kind of leading to Oracle, where also very great at training. And I know you spent, you and I were there during kind of the same time. That kind of, for me, was kind of the big breakout of putting all that foundation in place and then an environment that was very intensive at selling. It was just a really, really great combination, especially early in my career. So really fortunate that I had that foundation early on. And, I've even, as I kind of mentor and coach, whether it's my own kids or, other young people in the industry, to go with the companies, whether they're small or big, that really focus on training and development early on in the career. I think it's really important.
I say almost the same words when I'm talking with people that are early or just starting their career and they ask about big company or small company. I say, really look for something that you can learn and find a great teacher, a great mentor inside. And likewise, Andy, I say a similar thing about my experience at Oracle in that while I was there, I didn't quite appreciate the amount of training that they were just injecting into us. I remember being called off the line, which, as a seller, you're thinking, okay, this is time away from doing what makes me money, to be pulled into classes, sometimes for just a couple hours, but sometimes for a couple of days, like a negotiation class or something like that. And I look back on that now, it's like one of those things that as you said so well, when you're there, you just don't always see the value of it.
Yeah, think about when I did IBM, the whole first year of employment was training, helping you become an enterprise technology seller. And I think I did in-person classes, 8-10 weeks throughout that year, which is kind of unheard of. The cost and the effort that it takes for a company to do that. Today everything would be virtual, and the investment those companies made in in-person training and spending that amount of time is just, you don't see it anymore. And I hope more companies get back to it as, we continue to grow and develop.
Same. I feel similar mindset with you. Well, let's continue this discussion on the value of education, but in a slightly different way. I recall something unique about you when we were working together at Oracle, that you were a bag-carrying individual contributor, and you enrolled yourself at Northwestern to get your MBA. A pretty atypical path for sales reps. So I'm interested to know, what were the demands like from a time perspective of staying a top producing sales rep for Oracle, but also getting that degree?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was married when I got the degree, but I didn't have kids. which the kid thing helped because I couldn't imagine having both. But also I was doing it in the evening. So I still worked a full day and then went to school twice a week in the evening and then studied most weekends. So the sacrifice and the time commitment, I think it took 3 years, was pretty significant. So, obviously I prioritized, getting an MBA and why that was important to me, but it was not an easy balance. Now, fortunately at Oracle, they were very supportive back in the day, and I also didn't have a big travel job, so I was, in town most weeks, and then I could work around my class schedule when I did have to go out of town. So it worked out, and obviously I graduated, a handful of years later with my degree at Kellogg.
That's terrific. And you clearly saw something in the value of doing that, working a full-time day job and then taking the time to sacrifice from your personal life and do this for 3 years to get it. That education experience, how did it help you for the professional self that you've become?
Yeah, it's always hard to quantify, but if I go back to why I did it, I kind of had this belief, 30 odd years ago, that future sellers would not just be about the deal, about the transaction. And, you think about that era, it was all about the big deal. It was on-prem, big commission checks, all great, but I kind of felt there was going to be, and, the software industry back then was a bit of the wild, wild west, but the future seller would evolve to being focused on strategy, on business impact, on executive relationships, on being operationally efficient, on people development. And I felt, and it was hard to quantify. I was a young guy in the industry to say, how do I know? But I felt the MBA would be a way to help validate that belief. And, obviously people get an MBA because they want to go into investment banking or management consulting. I stayed the course in this tech/enterprise software industry. And I think it became foundational for me and for my career. And, during that time I moved into leadership. And, I think a lot of what I learned became foundational of not just being a deal leader, but just, all those other things I mentioned and, kind of being more rounded. And I think the MBA gave me that, that grounding to be able to do that and grow. I think it was very foundational, one of the more important things I did in my professional career.
Yeah, you're so right. There's a lot of those folks that we've worked with that knew exactly what they wanted, and it was to be a pro-level seller. They wanted to be responsible for themselves and their accounts and just stay that path. You clearly were looking ahead, and you had some of that itch to maybe put your career on a different arc, which was to move into management. What was it that motivated you? Kind of the chicken and the egg here. Was it going through the MBA process, or was that something that was already in the back of your head as you initiated starting the MBA?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always felt, even before I did it, when you've been an individual contributor, you really don't know what leadership is like, but I always had that aspiration, whether it was during my time in college or high school, of things I did or clubs I got involved with and the roles I took on, that I felt the need to lead. I enjoyed it. I got, purpose and impact out of it. And then when the opportunity arose at Oracle, probably very similar for you, it was a very high growth environment, very intense, but it created opportunity for young people in their career that, you wouldn't probably have gotten at an IBM at the time. And I also kind of came to the conclusion that, I had more impact to give back to the company or a team than just my own territory. And that was a big kind of pivotal point for me to make the switch, over 30 years ago.
I think I have a very analogous kind of situation. If you remember, I was a telesales rep in California.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
But I was supporting the Chicago area where you were. And I was on a mission just as a young single professional developing my career to get myself moved out to Chicago as a field rep and follow in the path that you were on. And I remember it finally came. I remember Janelle Kreiner called my manager back in California and said, look, we have an open spot. Bill's been proving himself. We'd love to have him come out. And I was so excited about that. And my boss's boss sat me down and said, hey, I want to call out an observation. I noticed that other people come to you before they walk over to their boss's office. she said, there's something that you're exhibiting that people trust your judgment. She said, have you ever considered management? And here I was, a 25-year-old on this path, just wanting to go out to the field. And what hooked me was she said something really impactful. She said, listen, you're 25 years old and you have the opportunity to go into management at Oracle Corporation. I think you should seriously consider it. And so I kind of went home and did a T-chart of like going out into the field or being a manager, and I opted for the field side.
But you know what, I think at that time, getting field experience at a company like Oracle when it was on that trajectory, that's hard to pass up. And obviously, you know, shortly thereafter you moved into management, so I think it worked out brilliantly.
Yeah, it was definitely a good move. So, well, great stuff. Let's go into a little bit more about scaling and developing businesses here. One thing that I think is really interesting in how people build their career is, do they lock into one thing? Like you said, you've really focused on building your career in sales and growing that way. Some people pick a specific industry. Some people pick a specific type of software like security or something like that. You've had a pretty wide breadth there. You've sold, Oracle days, databases to database administrators. After that, you sold product lifecycle management to manufacturers. You sold email marketing tools to CMOs. You even, during your stint at Salesforce, ran the B2C organization. So you've had a pretty broad view of selling to different buyers. I'm curious, did those roles pick you, Andy, or was that very, like, did you plan that I wanted to be able to go sell and have a very wide experience of working with different types of buyers?
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional when you say that, and I look back from database to apps, especially at the later part of Oracle, PLM, digital marketing, CRM, and then data and AI with Databricks. And, all vastly different, very different buyers. Because I see people who've done ERP for decades or supply chain or, even when I went into ExactTarget, calling on CMOs where people have spent the last 10 or 15 years calling on CMOs selling digital. And I'm like, wow, I've never done that. And I think part of it is I didn't really look at it from a functional area of where I focused. I looked at it more from a company and a market. You think about Oracle database in the early 90s. I mean, the innovation, high growth, it was very strategic. It was transformational for many companies. Moving into apps, product development in the 2000s with Dassault Systems was very transformational. Digital marketing, we kind of know that story. CRM and now data and AI. I mean, it's the secular trend is massive. So I think I looked more at the market opportunity than, hey, I want to become a specialist and getting very functionally focused. And I don't, I'm not a visionary by any stretch, but you kind of see things. Just like coming into Databricks 3 years ago, I'm like, wow, what are CIOs and executives really talking about? Everything was around data at the time, and evolved to data and AI, and kind of said, hey, I need to go, if I'm going to do something next, it's a company like that. And had the good fortune of Databricks and I kind of coming together, and I think that happened every stage of those steps, Bill, that I kind of found the secular trends that were innovative, high growth, strategic, and transformational that kind of ticked that curiosity for me.
Yeah, I feel similar, probably because my background's a lot like yours, that I've sold across different buyers. I always looked for what I thought the next opportunity was going to be. So similar kind of mindset. It's a good place to transition into talking about growth and getting closer to where you're at today inside of Databricks. Andy, knowing that a lot of the listeners of this podcast are people that are founders of companies that are growing, they're going through different levels of that growth. I want to talk about some of those staging. You're currently leading $1 billion plus organization. You've done that now twice in your career at Salesforce and at Databricks. Pretty rare air to do that. So I'd love to dive into some of the elements there. Sure. Let's go backwards first so that we can, I think, connect with some of the listeners on this episode. If we go back to your ET days, the ExactTarget days, you're in there leading an organization that's around $400 million in revenue when the acquisition by Salesforce happened. That alone was a complex organization to lead, but probably not near as much as what you grew into. You eventually, 8 years later, departed Salesforce as the president of North America, again, a multi-billion-dollar business. Can you offer some insights into the mindset change, the mental change that you go through from leading a company that's maybe 100, couple hundred million, 400 million in your case, up to growing to leading billion-dollar organizations?
Yeah, sure. But maybe just to kind of give context for the story, when I joined ExactTarget, we were maybe 400 or 500 employees, 90 million in revenue. I think across the sales organization, the go-to-market organization, we had maybe 7,500 people. And then, when public got acquired, as you said, around 400 million, and, kept that during my time at Salesforce until I took on the North American job. And, kind of that digital marketing, which was rebranded B2C, grew to, a couple of $1 billion over that 5 or 6 years. And that was kind of my first foray in, the $1 billion plus business, and then took over North America the last couple of years before I came here to Databricks. And I think at the peak we were, roughly 10 billion in revenue. So growing into it was obviously a great way to do it, because you got kind of foundation in the business, and then you kind of were able to see it scale. But I learned a lot through that process, and I think going to Salesforce, of seeing the machine of how they operationalize businesses and grow them to $1 billion pluses and kind of learn that system, was very, very powerful. And obviously having a good run there, but also being able to take, some of that, because we're doing a lot of things differently here at Databricks, but kind of that foundation of what it takes to run a $1 billion plus business, from a scale perspective. So really, really interesting, experience for sure.
So earlier you mentioned that one of the things that you wanted to get your MBA for was to go more into the strategic thinking, to work cross-functionally, to think about the people side. As you did that scaling from the acquisition of ExactTarget into Salesforce and then growing into running all of North America, was there one area that was harder than others to grow? And that could either be a functional question, like a marketing versus CS versus sales, or was there one element of that strategic element that you found especially challenging to develop your muscle memory in?
Yeah, I think for me, when you think about the different stages of growth, kind of the builder, grower, scaler, if you think about that, for me, and I think part of it's style, personality. The builder for me was always the hardest, which is when you're scrappy, you're smaller, you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have process, you don't have all the right people and leaders. Some people love that stage of growth. For me, that's the hardest, because I'm, more focused on, building the right leadership, the operational rigor, well-defined process. And once you get that foundation in place, at 200, 300, 400 million, 500 million, which is probably where we really got it dialed in at ExactTarget, then going to $1 billion, going to $2 billion, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very foundational. And I find the same thing at, Databricks. I think I joined, we had just hit 300 million. This fiscal year will be, kind of in the $2.5 billion range. And that's massive growth for a company like us. And, you put a lot of the scale pieces in that I just highlighted. I find, you can run this a long way before you have trouble. But you've got to be able to get out of that early builder phase where you're doing it all. You got your hand and, finger in every dike. You're in every deal. You're making every decision. You kind of have that philosophy. It's really hard to scale to the $1 billion plus.
Got it. Let's stay there on a couple of people-related issues, because I think you bring up something there about getting yourself out of the business and evolving from that builder mentality to becoming the grower, the scaler. Let's start here. There was a day in your career, Andy, that you were in what I call the Superman phase, which is where you wear the red cape, you wear the red boots, and when there's the big deal that needs to get closed, you're the person that we send in to get that one done. But there's a stage that you just talked about where you scale past that. You move further away from the deal because your job becomes around creating of how the business actually runs, the hiring, the profiles, the comp plans, the methodologies, the rigor and the process, all the things that you mentioned there. 2 questions here on this. How do you pass that torch down to your next level sales leaders? And then the add-on question here is, when you're interviewing for talent, what do you look for that gives you confidence that that person can also be on a growth path and pass the torch down when it's appropriate?
Yeah, it's tough. I think most leaders struggle with that transition. Think about when you and I got promoted from individual contributor, account exec to first line manager, and then to second line manager, and obviously up the chain. I think that one of the hardest transitions is going from AE to first line manager, because as you're an AE, you're all about you. I mean, all you care about is you and what you sell and your customer and what it means for you. And as a first line, and you control everything, but as a first line manager, you might have 6 or 8 reps. And now it's not all about you, it's about your people, your team, and how do you make them successful. And most young managers, I know I did, really struggled with that transition. It took me a while to really figure it out, where instead of it's about you, it's about your team, and you've got to become very selfless about finding your glory, finding your impact, not through what you've accomplished, but what your team has accomplished. And I think that's a big transition, of finding the people who know how to be great individual contributors to those who have potential to be great leaders. And then, I think the next big phase is kind of moving from that first line leader to a second or third line, because when you're a first line, you can still be in every deal. You're the hero. You can come in and get the deal done at the end of the quarter or whatever the timing is. Second line, you can still kind of do it. Third line, it gets very difficult because your business is bigger. You can't touch everything. You've got dozens, if not, near 100 people, depending on the size of the organization. And so there you have to think a little differently around, do I have the right leadership in place? Do they know how to operate the business? Do we have a consistent process? Do we have an operating methodology of how we run our deals and how we forecast and build pipeline and recruit and develop and all of those things, because you're doing it at scale? And that is I think that's a kind of a learned trait. And I see a lot of people who want to make every decision, want to run every deal, and at a certain size it works, but at a certain size they become the bottleneck, and typically will flame out at some point. So I kind of probably, like you and many others, have learned the hard way of what scale really means. And I use this analogy around flipping the pyramid, because you think about an organization, that let's say you have a 1,000-person team. And if you're just focused at the top on the deals that you manage or the people you interact with, how much are you really impacting? Where you should really be focused is down at the other end of the pyramid, which is all the individual contributors, the 500, 600, 700 AEs you have out there, and field engineering team, about what impact they're making. How are they understanding the messaging, the positioning? How are they taking it to market? How are they driving the deals? Are they doing it consistently? All of those things, because if you can drive 10% improvement across those 600 or 700 sellers, that's going to have a lot more impact than the 1 or 2 deals that you're going to impact, or the couple of things that you're focused on at the top of the pyramid. So it's flipping it and putting all your energy on how do you make the people on the front line successful. It's kind of a mind frame shift. And I learned that early on and got it really dialed in at Salesforce, because I think they do a great job at the efficiency and productivity and scale. And I see Databricks, even before me, has done the company's doing an amazing job at building scale like that.
That's really advanced thinking there. I had a similar type of scenario. I think that anybody that's moved into a leadership role would probably tell you that first role from individual to leader was probably one of the hardest. But I think it's a skill you continue to develop and grow. Because I can think 20 years after I joined my first management role, right as Marketo was nearing its IPO, we were probably about 6 months away, our CFO, great man named Fred Ball, who had been through an IPO, came to me and said, let's go to lunch. And he said to me at that lunch, a term I'll never forget. He said, Bill, you need to learn the disenjoyment of selling. And I had to look, I was like, that's a $2 word there, man. Like disenjoyment. What does that mean? And he said, Bill, there was a day that you were the person that when a customer was on fire, we'd send you in to put it out. Or when we needed that big deal closed, we'd send you in. He said, that's no longer your job. Your job is to hire that person now. Persons, actually. Like you're going to hire the team of people that do that. And so I think that's totally true, that as a individual contributor moving to management, that's probably one of the hardest things to do, because you were probably promoted because you were good at whatever that individual role you did. And so first thing you try to do is overcompensate, but you learn pretty quickly that you have 7, 8, 9, 10 people working for you. You just don't have enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
And then as you advance forward in your career, you get to, like what you said, where you're second, third line level. And there's still an element of where you get engaged, but how you get engaged does change.
There is no question. And, there's an operational piece of scaling, but there's also, I think, a mental aspect as a leader. And, it's back to, hey, I want to be the hero. Hey, I'm going to go win the deal. Hey, I've got my ego I need to feed, which is very much the makeup you look for in an AE. But as a leader, it's how are they helping the team? How are they developing? How are they becoming a partner? How are they advocating for them? And can they go in and have the big executive meeting and help work a deal?
Yeah.
Because that's still foundational at what they do, but it can't be the first and foremost, because you'll never get to the scale that you're trying to drive to in the business. And you think about the whole SaaS model, and we're in a consumption business, but it's kind of the next evolution of SaaS. If you can't build scale in your business, it's hard to support the valuations, and it's really hard to drive a long-term sustainable business. So I think scale and leadership and process and operational rigor are just foundational in how you do that as a company, and more importantly as a leader.
I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying here, because I know a number of the listeners to this podcast are at startup or earlier stage companies, but I think everything you're saying, despite the fact you're at Databricks, this multi-billion-dollar business, apply down. It's about repeatability. How do you create that as fast and as early as you can inside of your business so that you have a predictability that's there? Let's use that as a good transition to talking about some of the bigger company issues that you probably face. I think almost every founder that I meet with, Andy, aspires that they have this product that they're beginning with, to develop it into this global company that sells to everybody, that is a multi-product platform. So really that journey from single product through to becoming multi-product is top of mind for most cloud founders. I think any company that scaled past $1 billion started there and then developed that platform, which is obviously tough to do. Of all the motions you do of going international, changing segments, I think becoming a multi-product company is tough, because sometimes you even have to do things like segment and split your sales force, meaning you have multiple reps calling on the same company. Hard to do. We all talk about, but hard to do. I'm curious what you can share with our listeners around making that motion happen inside of a company.
Yeah, it's interesting. There probably are a few examples of companies who kind of have been a one product company and just a massive TAM, and they've, exploited it. But I think the ones that are going to sustain and become enterprise platforms, multi-billion-dollar plus massive valuations, are going to be multi-product. And, I think a lot of that starts with the CEO, founder, CTO to make that a reality. I've had the good fortune starting with, back to, Oracle, Dassault Systems, ExactTarget, Salesforce, and Databricks have all been multi-product companies, because, back to the foundation of what you look for that massive market opportunity where you have a product portfolio that can go horizontal across many industries and then vertically within the industry. And normally it starts out with one, but it expands. And I think it's really, you think about from a go-to-market strategy, if I can go into a small to medium to large business and be able to tailor that solution based on size of company, and then bring another flavor around industry, it just gives you so much optionality of where you sell, and how you segment the market. Now, it adds complexity as far as the go-to-market strategy, and I've seen both where the multi-product has been via acquisition. I think that can get really complex because you're dealing typically with multiple buyers, a different selling motion, potentially a different tech stack. Saw that at Salesforce. As you know, Oracle very much had that. And I think that can get complex, but very, very powerful if it's done well. Ideally, and I'm seeing it at Databricks, is when the multi-product strategy is done organically. Wow, that can become a massive machine, because now you can have the same seller selling across the same tech stack. Again, maybe slightly different buyers because you've got different needs, but you have everything tightly integrated in a platform environment. That is optimal when you think about it from a strategy perspective, not only company, but also efficiency on the go-to-market side.
No question. Do you have any opinion on, if you step back, go to the exact target days when you joined it at 90 million or so, for companies that are developing that, is there a right time? Is there a perfect time for when you add that next product?
I think you've got to, and I saw it at Exact Target, and to some degree Databricks, but I think I came in after that was kind of decided, is once you've proven out on your core product market fit that has a massive TAM, and you've proven that you can become, as I say, the number one or two player. Maybe you're not there on market share, but you see the market momentum, the growth, the impact from customers. Once you have that in place, I think you need to quickly, if not already, have started kind of the overall strategy of the second and third. Because, part of this is also how you sell to customers, which is normally when you're in a multi-product environment, you're coming in telling a platform story, which, as we know, many customers love because they're looking to narrow their focus on strategic technology vendors they deal with. And if you've got the right vision, you've got a foundation at least with one or two products, and you have the vision for products 3, 4 through N, that is a very powerful story that you can sell to the market.
Copy that.
Long story short, sooner, but you've got to make sure you get the first one out of the blocks before you get distracted.
Yeah, I agree. My experience shows that same type of thing. I remember there was a stage of Marketo where we debated an acquisition, and we asked ourselves, do we own the market? Are we the leader in some portion of our market, a geo, a segment, something like that? And the answer, as much as we wanted to say yes, was no, it's not. Yeah. And we said, maybe we just bite our tongues at this moment and stay focused on making that happen before we go do that.
Yeah, it's a great example of getting distracted too early.
Yeah. Last one for you here, Andy, and then we can wrap up. Another strategy of growing to $1 billion and past $1 billion is, we've talked about segmentation, we've talked about multiple products. There's a different type of segmentation, which is going from a horizontal strategy to a more verticalized or industry-focused type of strategy. Love to have you share some of your thoughts around that kind of move.
Yeah, I've seen it and been part of it, both early days of Dassault Systems. We did it early at Exact Target, got very aggressive with it at Salesforce, and same thing at Databricks. I think we're a couple of years in, and maybe talk about the experiences here, because it's very much a horizontal platform from small to large, but you bring in the industry orientation. And it was started when I got here, and part of the strategy was to really accelerate it. And fortunately, our CRO and head of field engineering were big believers, as our CEO is, on industry. And we kind of put it in motion and now have 8 core industries. And it has been a game changer, because you think about, when you go to market, and even though the product is still the same horizontal foundational Databricks platform, which we call the data intelligence platform, it serves 8 different industries across all these segments. But when you bring, a seller in, instead of getting them, sold on 3 or 4 different industries, you get them around the industry-specific problems for financial services or retail banking and all the use cases, understanding competition and the partners. And then, the messaging, the positioning when you go talk to customers is very tailored to retail banking within financial services. The marketplace, the use cases, customer references, the key partners, and it makes the selling team much more effective and also much better connection with the customers. And I think the customers like it as well. So my encouragement on this is, once you've established market fit and you start seeing scale, start thinking of other ways that you can bring specialization without impacting product to the go-to-market organization. And I think Salesforce did it successfully. We've been doing it very successfully here at Databricks, and I think it's a really great foundation in helping to drive scale and high-growth businesses.
This is great, Andy. I'll summarize a couple of highlights I think of today. Is number one, the importance of training and education and building your career and building that strategic thinking. I loved your thoughts on the builder, grower, scaler whole stage evolution. I think your flipping the pyramid was a great place. This podcast is called Sound Bites, so I'm suspecting that one will shoot up to the top there. But I really love that last element you closed on there, is specialization without impacting product. I think that's a great strategic thought process for especially founders and the product leaders to really think about, of how do you go find new places to expand your TAM or expand your ICP to be able to go add revenue without having to go jump through hoops to change the product on. Awesome.
Great summary, Bill.
Thank you so much for being my guest. I know you mentioned your CRO there of Databricks, who I think is a fellow alumni of Purdue with you. I believe you two will be in Phoenix this week for the Final Four.
He and I are loyal Boilermakers, so we're going to be rooting on Purdue at the Final Four.
Well, good wishes for your team. And Andy, again, thanks so much for joining me today.
You bet, Bill. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.